I walked into my parents' dining room and froze. A stranger in a gray suit sat at the table, sliding papers across to my father. My mother stood behind him with her arms crossed, wearing that tight smile she used when she got exactly what she wanted. I recognized the header on the documents before anyone noticed me. Caldwell Antiques and Estate Holdings. My grandfather's store. The land he promised would be mine. What's going on? My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. My father looked up, and his expression didn't change. No guilt. No surprise. Just cold satisfaction. We finalized the sale this morning, he said. The antique store, the residential property, and the land parcel. All of it. My mother added, You weren't ready to handle it, Marin. We made the practical choice. The stranger gathered his papers and stood. Congratulations on the sale, he told my parents, completely ignoring me. My knees felt weak. Everything my grandfather built, everything he promised me, gone. Sold while I was at work, like I didn't matter at all. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. My name is Marin Fletcher, and I was 26 years old the day my parents stole my inheritance. My earliest memories happened inside that antique store. The smell of old wood and furniture polish. Dust floating in afternoon sunlight through the tall windows. My grandfather, Warren Caldwell, moved between the crowded aisles like he was dancing. He knew every item's history. The Victorian lamp came from an estate sale in Charleston. The mahogany desk survived a house fire in 1952. He taught me to see stories instead of objects. Everything here has a past, he used to say, running his hand along a carved chair back. And someday, this will all be yours, kiddo. I spent every weekend there from age 7 onward. While other kids played soccer, I learned to refinish furniture and spot reproduction pieces. My grandfather made me hot chocolate in winter and lemonade in summer. We'd sit in his cluttered office, and he'd tell me about building the business from nothing. The store wasn't just a building. It was his legacy, and he promised it would be mine. The jealousy started years before his death. I was 14 when I first heard it. My mother's voice carried through the house late one night. He gives her everything. What about us? We're his actual children. My father's response was quieter, but I caught the bitterness in his tone. She's a favorite. Always has been. I didn't understand then. My grandfather loved everyone. He just understood me differently. We shared something my parents never valued. A love for history, for preservation, for the stories behind objects most people threw away. My mother always complained about the store taking up his time. She wanted him to sell it, retire properly, travel more. But my grandfather refused. This store is my purpose, he told her once during Sunday dinner. Without it, I'm just an old man waiting to die. That comment made my mother's face go tight. She left the table without eating. My father followed her. Even at 14, I knew that comment would come back to haunt us. My grandfather died on a Tuesday in October. Heart attack while opening the store. Mr. Adler, his longtime employee, found him slumped over the register. The funeral was small. My grandfather never liked fuss. During the service, my mother cried dramatically while my father stood stone-faced beside her. I couldn't cry at all. The grief felt too big to release in public. A week later, I went to the store to collect his personal papers. My grandfather had always kept important documents in his office, organized in labeled binders. But when I arrived, my father was there, locking the office door. What are you doing? I asked. He pocketed the key without meeting my eyes. Legal things. Estate stuff. Stay out of it. But Grandpa said I should handle. You're 26 years old with no business experience. He cut me off. Your mother and I are the executors. We'll manage everything. Something in his voice made my stomach twist. But I was too numb with grief to argue. I let him walk past me. I let him take control. That was my first mistake. 3 weeks after the funeral, I received a condolence card in the mail. It came from Arthur Brennan, one of my grandfather's oldest friends. The message inside was simple but strange. Your grandfather spoke often of you in his final months. He wrote you a letter explaining his wishes. I hope it brought you comfort during this difficult time. I read it 3 times. What letter? I'd received no letter from my grandfather. I called Arthur immediately. Did he mail it to me? I asked. or give it to someone to deliver? Arthur hesitated. He told me he was leaving it with his estate documents. Said you'd find it when the time came. Your parents haven't given you access to those papers. No, I said slowly. They told me to stay out of it. Arthur's silence spoke volumes. When he finally responded, his voice was careful. Your grandfather loved you very much, Maren. Make sure you get what's rightfully yours. After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone. My parents had his documents. They were the executors. If there was a letter, they would have given it to me. Unless they had a reason not to. I started looking through old boxes in my parents' attic the following weekend. They were out of town visiting my aunt. I told myself I was just searching for photos of my grandfather. But really, I was looking for that letter. I found his estate planning binder buried under Christmas decorations. The moment I opened it, I knew something was wrong. Entire sections were missing. The page tabs still existed, labeled Final Will and Property Distribution and Special Instructions, but the actual pages had been torn out. Not accidentally, deliberately. Clean tears along the binding. My hand started shaking. I heard footsteps on the attic stairs and shoved the binder back into the box. My mother appeared in the doorway, her face tight. What are you doing up here? Looking for photos, I managed. Of Grandpa. She crossed her arms. You should have asked first. I thought you wouldn't mind. Well, I do mind. She stepped closer, her eyes dropping to the boxes around me. That binder you were looking at, it's outdated anyway. Your grandfather changed his plans before he died. Changed them how? That's between the executors and the estate attorney. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Don't worry about any of this, sweetie. We're handling everything properly. I went to the antique store the next day. Mr. Adler was there, sorting through inventory. He was 73 years old and had worked for my grandfather for 40 years. When he saw me, his weathered face softened. Maren, he said, pulling me into a hug. How are you holding up? I don't know any more, I admitted. We sat in the back office, surrounded by my grandfather's things. Mr. Adler made coffee in the ancient pot my grandfather never replaced. Can I ask you something? I said carefully. Did my grandfather seem worried about anything before he died? Mr. Adler's hand paused over his coffee mug. Worried how? About his estate. About his wishes being ignored. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned forward. Your grandfather loved your parents, but he didn't trust their judgment. About 6 months before he died, he told me something. He said, if anything seems off after I'm gone, if the estate handling feels wrong, tell Maren to look deeper. I didn't understand what he meant then. And now, I whispered. Now I think he knew they'd try something. Mr. Adler met my eyes. He wanted you to have this place, Maren. He told me that more than once. Whatever your parents are doing, it's not what he wanted. I started paying closer attention. Watching my parents when they thought I wasn't looking. Listening to their phone conversations. 2 weeks later, I was doing laundry at their house when I found something in my father's jacket pocket. A business card. Hartwell Development Group. On the back, in my father's handwriting, were notes. Acquisition timeline. October closing. Market value assessment. This was in August. 2 months before my grandfather died. My father was already talking to developers about selling the property. Before my grandfather was even gone. I took a photo of the card and put it back exactly where I found it. My hands were trembling, so badly I could barely hold my phone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing my father's handwriting. October closing. He'd been planning this for months. Maybe longer. Everything they said about making practical decisions was a lie. This was premeditated. They'd been waiting for my grandfather to die so they could cash out his life's work. The whispered argument happened on a Sunday night. I'd stopped by their house to return a borrowed book. I was about to knock when I heard my mother's voice through the door, sharp and desperate. We need that money, Thomas. The credit cards are maxed out, and the second mortgage payment is coming due. My father's voice was lower, harder to hear. We're moving as fast as we can. The estate takes time to process. Then make it faster, my mother hissed. We can't let Maren figure out what we're doing. She won't find out. I made sure of that. What if she asks questions? What if she talks to Warren's lawyer? She's too emotional to think clearly right now. By the time she realizes what happened, everything will be finalized. We'll give her some cash from the sale and tell her that's her share. She'll accept it because she won't have a choice. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering. I walked to my car, got in, and sat in the dark for 20 minutes. They were lying to me, actively planning to steal my inheritance, and they thought I was too stupid or too grief-stricken to notice. I confronted them 3 days later. Softly, carefully, "Can we talk about Grandpa's estate?" I asked during dinner at their house. My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What about it? I just want to understand the timeline. When will it be probated? When can I see the documents?" My father set down his water glass. "Why are you asking?" "Because I have a right to know. Grandpa told me I'd inherit the store." "People say a lot of things," my mother said dismissively. "The legal reality is different. So show me the will." "Marin, you're being paranoid." My father's voice took on that patronizing tone he used when he wanted to end a conversation. "Your mother and I are handling everything properly. You need to trust us." "I want to see the documents," I said more firmly. "You're too emotional right now," my mother cut in. "You're not thinking clearly. Grief makes people irrational. We're protecting you from making poor decisions." I looked between them. Both of their faces were carefully neutral, practiced, like they'd rehearsed this conversation. "I'm not irrational," I said quietly. "I'm asking legitimate questions. And we're telling you to let us handle it," my father said flatly. End of discussion. I left their house feeling gaslit and small. But underneath the hurt, something harder was forming. Determination. I returned to the antique store alone the next morning. Mr. Adler was at an appointment, so I had the place to myself. I went straight to my grandfather's old desk. A massive oak piece that had sat in his office for 30 years. I'd sat at that desk countless times, doing homework while he worked. But I'd never really examined it. Not the way he taught me to examine antiques. I ran my hands along the drawers, checking for irregularities. The bottom right drawer seemed slightly shorter than it should be compared to the others. I pulled it all the way out and set it aside. Then I reached into the empty space and felt along the back panel. My fingers found a small indentation. A hidden release. I pressed it. Something clicked. A shallow compartment slid open in the desk's side panel. Inside was a small brass key attached to a tag. The tag had a number written in my grandfather's handwriting. And a single word. Truth. My heart was pounding. This was it. This was what he'd meant. The backup plan Mr. Adler mentioned. I slipped the key into my pocket and carefully closed the hidden compartment. Whatever this opened, my parents couldn't know I had it. Not yet. The bank was a 10-minute drive from the antique store. I went there the next day during my lunch break, the brass key clutched in my hand. "I need to access a safety deposit box," I told the bank representative. I showed her the key and the number. She typed into her computer, then frowned. "I'm sorry, but you're not listed as an authorized user on this box." "What?" "My grandfather owned that box. I'm his granddaughter. According to our records, the authorized users were changed 2 months ago. In September. 2 months ago. Right after my grandfather died. Who changed it?" I asked, though I already knew. She turned her screen toward me. The modification form showed 2 signatures. Thomas Fletcher. Patricia Fletcher. My parents. They'd removed my grandfather's name and added their own. They'd locked me out of whatever he'd hidden there. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" the representative asked. I shook my head, unable to speak past the anger choking my throat. I left the bank and sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. They'd thought of everything, every possible way I might find the truth. They'd blocked it all. I confronted them again that evening. I didn't mention the key or the bank. I just asked directly, "I want to see Grandpa's will." My father sighed like I was an annoying child. "We've been over this." "Then let's go over it again." My mother stood and walked to the home office. She returned with a document folder. "Since you won't let this go," she said, placing it on the table in front of me. "Here. This is your grandfather's final will." I opened the folder with shaking hands. The document looked official. Proper legal language, notarized stamp, the whole thing. But as I read, my blood went cold. Last will and testament of Warren Caldwell, executed April 15th of this year. I leave my entire estate, including all properties and business holdings, to my children Thomas Fletcher and Patricia Fletcher, to be divided equally between them. Nothing for me. Not a single mention. I stared at the signature at the bottom. It looked like my grandfather's handwriting. But something felt wrong. The pressure was different. The loops too careful. He changed his mind. My mother said softly, "I'm sorry, Marin. He loved you, but he decided family should handle the estate." I looked up at her. Her expression was sympathetic, perfectly performed, but her eyes were cold. "This isn't real," I whispered. My father's face hardened. "That's enough. You need to accept reality and move on." I found Daniel Moss's contact information in my grandfather's old Rolodex. He'd been my grandfather's estate attorney for 20 years. When I called, his secretary tried to brush me off. "Mr. Moss is no longer involved with the Caldwell estate. I need to speak with him anyway. It's urgent." She put me on hold. 3 minutes later, Mr. Moss came on the line. "Miss Fletcher, I wondered if you'd reach out." "What happened?" I asked. "Why aren't you handling my grandfather's estate anymore?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Your parents terminated my services immediately after your grandfather's death. They said they wanted an attorney more familiar with quick estate closures." Quick closures? I advised them that rushing probate was unnecessary and potentially problematic. They disagreed. They hired someone else. "The will they showed me," I said carefully. "From April. Did you draft that?" "I drafted a will for your grandfather in April, yes. But he asked me to hold it for revision. He said he wanted to add specific protections. We scheduled an appointment for May, but he canceled it. Said he'd handle it differently." My throat was tight. "What kind of protections?" He wouldn't tell me specifics. Just said he needed to ensure certain people couldn't override his wishes. "Miss Fletcher, I can't give legal advice without being retained, but I'll say this. The last will I have on file was from 3 years ago. It named you as primary beneficiary. I met with Mr. Adler again that afternoon. I told him everything. The hidden key, the blocked safety deposit box, the suspicious will, all of it. He listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing darker. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Your grandfather told me something else," he finally said. "About 2 weeks before he died. He said, if anyone tries to steal from Marin, she needs to follow the paper trail." I asked what he meant. He just smiled and said, "She's smart. She'll figure it out." "Paper trail," I repeated. "Did he say anything else?" "He mentioned that the truth was hidden where only you would think to look. That you'd understand his system because he taught you." His system? My grandfather's organizational system. I'd spent years learning how he coded inventory, how he marked items for specific purposes. We'd even created a private notation system when I was 12. A game between us. Suddenly, I knew exactly where to look. "The ledgers," I said. "His old inventory ledgers." Mr. Adler's eyes widened. "The ones in the store office. He kept ledgers going back 40 years. With his special notation system. I was already standing. If he hid something, he'd mark the location in code. Somewhere my parents would never think to check. We spent the next 3 hours going through every ledger in the office. And finally, in the 2020 ledger, I found it. Small symbols next to specific inventory items. The same symbols my grandfather used to teach me about furniture authentication when I was young. When I decoded them, they spelled out a location. Wardrobe. Victorian. West wall. The Victorian wardrobe stood against the west wall of the showroom. Dark mahogany, carved doors, brass hinges. I'd walked past it 1,000 times. I'd never thought to truly examine it. Mr. Adler and I approached it together. My hands were shaking as I opened the doors. Inside hung old coats and moth-eaten garments. Props my grandfather used for staging. I removed them carefully, feeling along the wardrobe's interior walls. Nothing. Then I remembered. My grandfather always said the most valuable secrets were hidden in plain sight. I knocked on the wardrobe's back panel. "Hello." I pressed along the edges, searching for a release mechanism. Finally, my fingers found a small carved rose in the upper corner. I pushed it. The back panel clicked and swung inward. Behind it was a shallow compartment. Inside was a sealed manila envelope with my name written across the front in my grandfather's handwriting. My legs nearly gave out. Mr. Adler steadied me. "Open it," he said gently. I broke the seal with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter, written in my grandfather's careful script. "My dearest Marin, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and things have not gone according to the plan I showed your parents. I'm sorry you had to search for this, but I needed to make sure only you would find it. Your parents have always valued money over meaning. I fear they will try to liquidate everything I built the moment I'm gone, so I've taken precautions. Follow these instructions exactly." The letter continued with specific directions. "Go to First National Bank on Hartwell Street, not the branch where your parents have accounts. This is a different location. Ask for Safety Deposit Box 2847. The key you found in my desk will open it. Inside, you'll find my true final will, properly notarized and legally binding. I created it with Daniel Moss before he was dismissed. I also included evidence of certain financial irregularities your parents may attempt. The will is registered under a pseudonym, Yar Caldwell, to prevent interference. The bank manager, Helen Torres, knows the truth. She'll help you." The letter concluded with words that made tears stream down my face. "You are my legacy, Marin. Not the money or the property, but you. Your love for history, for preservation, for stories. Don't let anyone take that from you. Stand firm. Fight back. Make me proud. All my love, Grandpa." I read it 3 times before I could speak. Mr. Adler had tears in his eyes, too. "He knew," I whispered. "He knew exactly what they'd do." "So what now?" Mr. Adler asked. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. "Now I get what's mine." The First National Bank on Hartwell Street was across town. I went alone. Helen Torres met me in a private room. She was in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "You're Marin," she said immediately. "Warren told me you'd come eventually. I'm sorry it took so long. You knew my grandfather? He was a client for 30 years. Good man. When he set up the special deposit box, he explained everything. Said his children were in financial trouble and would try to circumvent his wishes the moment he died. He wanted to protect you." She led me to the vault. My hands shook as I inserted the brass key into box 2847. Inside was a large envelope. I carried it back to the private room and opened it. The first document was a will, dated May 18th of this year, 5 months before my grandfather died. Last will and testament of Warren Eugene Caldwell. I leave my entire estate, including Caldwell Antiques, the residential property at 847 Oak Street, and the land parcel at County Road 19, to my granddaughter, Marin Elizabeth Fletcher. She is to be the sole heir and executor. Below that was a notarized statement, signed by Daniel Moss and 2 witnesses. And beneath that, copies of financial documents, credit card statements in my parents' names, loan applications, a second mortgage on their house, evidence of exactly what my grandfather had suspected. They were drowning in debt, and they'd planned to save themselves by selling his life's work. I took everything to Catherine Walsh, an estate attorney who came highly recommended. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and direct. She reviewed the documents methodically. When she finished, she looked up at me. "This is ironclad," she said. "Your grandfather covered every possible challenge. This will supersede anything your parents might present. What do I do now?" "We file a petition to probate this will as the true final testament. We'll need to prove the other will is fraudulent, but given the timeline and your grandfather's attorney's testimony, that won't be difficult. Your parents will likely face legal consequences for estate fraud." My hands clenched in my lap. "How long will this take?" "A few weeks to get a court date. Maybe a month. But Marin, once we file this, your relationship with your parents will be permanently damaged. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about my grandfather teaching me to refinish furniture. The way he'd ruffle my hair and call me kiddo. The promise he'd made that this would all be mine someday. "They damaged it when they decided to steal from me," I said. "File the petition." Catherine nodded. "I'll get started immediately." I left her office feeling lighter than I had in months. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time since my grandfather's death, I had hope. News traveled fast. 3 days after Catherine filed the petition, my mother called me. Her voice was high and strained. "What have you done?" "What I should have done weeks ago," I said calmly. "I'm contesting the will you showed me." "You can't do this, Marin. That will is legitimate. Then I'm sure the court will confirm that. Silence. Then, where did you even find an attorney? This is ridiculous. You're wasting money on legal fees for nothing. I found Grandpa's real will, I said. The one he actually signed. The one that leaves everything to me. More silence. Longer this time. When my mother spoke again, her voice had changed. Lower. Angrier. You're being selfish and ungrateful. After everything we've done for you. We raised you. We supported you. And this is how you repay us. You stole my inheritance, I said. You forged documents and lied to my face. Don't talk to me about gratitude. If you go through with this, you'll regret it. We're your parents. You'll lose us forever. You made that choice. Not me. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. 10 minutes later, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. Then my mother called again. Then my father again. I blocked both numbers and sat in my quiet apartment, feeling the weight of their panic settling around me like proof. The developer called me the following week. His name was Marcus Hartwell. His voice was professional but cautious. Miss Fletcher, I wanted to speak with you directly. I received notice that the property sale is being contested. That's correct, I said. Your parents assured me the estate was properly handled. If there are irregularities, my company wants no part of it. I appreciate that. For what it's worth, he continued, they approached me first. Last summer, they were very insistent on a quick closing. When I asked about other heirs, they said there were none. I accepted that in good faith. Last summer, months before my grandfather died. Thank you for telling me, I said. After he hung up, I sat staring at my phone. The timeline was even worse than I'd thought. They'd been planning this for nearly a year. Waiting. Watching my grandfather age. Counting down until they could cash in. I called Catherine and told her about the conversation. That's helpful, she said. Shows premeditation. I'll add it to our filing. What happens to them? I asked. Legally, I mean. If we win. If the court rules in your favor and determines they attempted estate fraud, they could face criminal charges. Fines. Possibly jail time. At minimum, they'll be removed as executors and likely barred from any inheritance claims. Good, I said. And I meant it. The court date was set for 6 weeks out. During that time, my parents tried everything to reach me. Letters. Emails from relatives. Even Mr. Adler reported that my mother showed up at the antique store demanding to know where I was. I didn't respond to any of it. I focused on work, on preparing my case, on gathering every piece of evidence Catherine needed. My grandfather's friends came forward one by one. Arthur Brennan, Helen Torres, even Daniel Moss agreed to testify about my parents' suspicious behavior. The day before the hearing, Catherine called me. Your parents' attorney contacted me. They want to settle. Settle how? They'll agree to let you have the store and residential property if you drop the fraud allegations and let them keep the land parcel proceeds. I laughed. Actually laughed. No. That's what I told them you'd say. Just wanted to confirm. They get nothing, I said firmly. My grandfather left everything to me. That's what the will says. That's what's going to happen. Understood. See you in court tomorrow. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the moment I'd walk into that courtroom. The moment my parents would realize they'd lost. Part of me felt guilty for looking forward to it. But mostly I just felt ready. Ready to honor my grandfather's wishes. Ready to reclaim what was mine. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, uncomfortable chairs. My parents sat on one side with their attorney, a middle-aged man in an ill-fitting suit. I sat on the other side with Catherine. My grandfather's friends filled the gallery behind me. My parents hadn't brought anyone. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair, reviewed the filings. This is a probate dispute, she began. The petitioner, Maren Fletcher, contests the validity of the will submitted by Thomas and Patricia Fletcher. She presents an alternative will dated after the disputed document. Let's begin. My parents' attorney stood. Your Honor, we submit the will dated April 15th, properly executed and notarized, leaving the estate to Mr. Caldwell's children. He placed the document before the judge. We maintain this is a valid final testament. Catherine stood. Your Honor, We submit the true final will, dated May 18th, also properly executed and notarized. This will specifically names Miss Fletcher as sole heir. We also provide testimony from the drafting attorney confirming this document's validity and noting suspicious circumstances around the April will. She placed our documents before the judge. The judge examined both carefully. The courtroom was silent except for the rustle of papers. Finally, the judge looked up. The May will appears properly executed. Mr. Moss's testimony is compelling. The timeline suggests the April document may have been superseded. Furthermore, the judge continued, her voice growing stern, the evidence of financial pressure and premeditation raises serious questions about the executor's conduct. The correspondence with Hartwell Development Group, dated before Mr. Caldwell's death, suggests planning to liquidate estate assets for personal benefit. My father's face had gone white. My mother stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. This court finds the May 18th will to be valid and superseding. The estate, including all properties and business holdings, passes entirely to Maren Elizabeth Fletcher. The April document is deemed invalid. Catherine squeezed my hand under the table. Additionally, the judge said, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation into possible estate fraud and forgery. Mr. and Mrs. Fletcher, you are removed as executors immediately. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down. My mother made a sound, half sob, half gasp. My father sat motionless, staring at the table. I stood on shaking legs. Behind me, Arthur Brennan and Helen Torres were smiling. Mr. Adler had tears streaming down his face. Catherine turned to me. You won. I couldn't speak, could only nod. My parents' attorney was already packing his briefcase, avoiding eye contact with his clients. As I walked past my parents toward the exit, my mother grabbed my arm. Maren, please. We can fix this. We're family. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The desperation in her eyes was real. But so was the calculation. Even now, she was trying to manipulate me. You stopped being my family when you stole from me, I said quietly. I pulled my arm free and walked out of the courthouse into afternoon sunshine, feeling the weight of my grandfather's legacy settle onto my shoulders where it belonged. 6 months later, I stood in the antique store, watching afternoon light pour through the windows the same way it had my whole childhood. The restoration was nearly complete. I'd kept everything my grandfather valued, updating only what was necessary for safety and efficiency. Mr. Adler still worked the register. We'd hired 2 new employees, both young people interested in learning the trade. The residential property had become a small museum showcasing local history. The land parcel I turned into a community garden, naming it Warren's Garden in my grandfather's honor. Local schools brought children to learn about growing food and preserving green space. My parents faced criminal charges for attempted estate fraud. They pled guilty to lesser charges, receiving probation and fines that forced them to sell their house. I heard they'd moved to a small apartment across town. We hadn't spoken since the trial. I didn't hate them, but I didn't forgive them either. Some betrayals were too deep to forget. That evening, after closing, I sat in my grandfather's old office chair. On the wall hung a framed photo of us together, taken the summer before he died. Both of us were smiling. We did it, Grandpa, I whispered to the empty room. We did it. Outside, the antique store sign glowed in the twilight. Caldwell Antiques, EST 1984. My inheritance, my legacy, my future, built not on money or property, but on love, trust, and the unshakable belief that truth always wins. Even when it takes time, even when it costs everything, the truth always wins. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What does family mean to you? Please share below and subscribe to this channel for more stories like mine.